losing the debate or has lost the debate. I think we have clarity at this point.
Yeah, I guess I think the question that I would have is sort of what it is that you think, to your mind, justifies rejection of particularism.
Well, I mean, if no one's going to talk, I'll talk. Yeah, I mean, I just would not hold particularism because in principle it justifies all actions. I don't think we should hold systems that in principle justify all actions. You can if you want to, I wouldn't.
Yeah, but isn't that the same thing as just restating that you reject it?
Wait, no. You didn't ask if I reject it or not. If you asked that, I would have said I reject it. You asked why do I reject it, and I spelled out the reasoning. I spelled out what it conflicts with respect to what I care about. I care about a system not in principle justifying all actions.
Well, it doesn't actually justify all actions, right? Consistent with any potential justification, right? Particularism is not actually justified.
Let me rephrase. In principle, can justify all actions.
No, I don't think particularism justifies anything.
Well, let's be clear. When you say you're a particularist, you are subjectively assigning moral status to actions, right? Like we established before, you subjectively assign the status wrong to the Holocaust.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. So in principle, you can assign via particularism whatever moral status you want to whatever action. There's not a deeper principle than just your particulars.
It's not a question of assigning moral value to what you want, right? The idea is that you perceive moral values, right? And what you take to be the right or the wrong action, right, is not going to be explained by a principle, right?
Yeah, so is there any action that you, in principle, keyword being principle, would be able to say is always wrong, even in a particularist framework?
I mean, people can differ on that.
But right? the principled answer is no. I mean, unless you hold a particular system that excludes certain actions. But in principle, if you're a particularist, if what you're saying is that the assignment of moral value just comes down to what I subjectively perceive to be valuable. You know, if I see something as good, it's good. If I see it as bad, there's no underlying principles. The fundamental reality there is that can justify anything.
Yeah, but principles can.
Well, no, not yeah, but yeah is the important point, and that's why I reject particularism.
Is it the case that principles can't justify anything?
Principles broadly spoken about could justify anything. Particularism could be talked about as a principle.
Okay, if you're conceding that principles can justify anything, right, then obviously your problem with particularism can't be that it's unprincipled, right? So that wouldn't be a good objection. So what I'm asking you is...
Well, no. The problem right there is that I hold principles that would not allow for a Holocaust to be justified.
That's fine. Right? That's fine. So, but I didn't ask you that.
Yeah, but particularism, that is not a moral system that is going to, in principle, say such a thing about a Holocaust.
Okay. I don't think you're really following what I'm trying to get at. So let me see if I can spell it out, right? If I have a particularist objection to a Holocaust, right, that's just as much an objection to the Holocaust as if I have a principled objection to the Holocaust, right? If I have a particularist judgment in favor of a Holocaust, right, that's just as much a consideration in favor of a Holocaust for that individual as it would be for somebody who has some kind of principle in favor of Holocausts, right? So if you're trying to actually talk about a specific content that you object to, right, it's not actually the case that particularism or what I'll call universalism, the contrary thesis, it's not actually the case that particularism or universalism, right, entail any content, right? So it wouldn't be a legitimate objection to say that the reason why I object to particularism is because particularism could be used to justify things that I judge to be evil, because somebody who has a principled view, a universalist view, could have principles that justify those same evils, right?
Yeah, but I think that the problem, what you're doing there, is you're just contrasting particularism to just this broad, vague, general category of principled positions. You could have whatever fucking principled position you want. And I would say that some principled positions are wrong with respect to my principled position, just like I would say that particularism is wrong with respect to my principled position.
That's fine, right? What I was asking for was whether you thought there was a justification for rejecting particularism, right? Because if somebody had particular judgments, right, that aligned with all your principal judgments, right, but they didn't appeal to a principle to justify or explain them, right, you couldn't say, oh, that person has judgments which legitimize things that I pose, right, because they wouldn't in that case.
Right? No, but their system in principle would justify any of those things if they just particularly want to do those things.
I don't think you're following what I'm saying.
Oh, I'm following what you're saying. I think that you are not following what I'm saying. So, Jack, I'll put it to you nice and clearly, okay? My system does not allow for a Holocaust. Is that clearly understood?
All right.
Particularism doesn't fundamentally oppose a Holocaust. And falsely contrasting particularism with principled views, instead of contrasting particularism with my specific principled view, is basically just a red herring.
Okay, well, let me try to pose the objection in a way that'll make it clear, I think, right?
Sure.
Do you think that universalism is consistent, can be consistent with holocausts?
Sure, obviously.
Okay. Right. And you also think that particularism can be consistent with opposing holocausts, right?
Well, it depends what you mean. In principle, particularism doesn't actually take any stance on a Holocaust. That's the problem with it.
Yeah. In principle, does universalism take a stance on a Holocaust?
Nope. And I'm going to ask you if you notice the red herring that you're dropping right now.
I don't think it's a red herring.
It is a red herring. You're targeting universalism broadly, which is not what I'm defending. I'm defending a specific system.
What I asked you, right, was if you thought there was a consideration, right, that could justify universalism over particularism.
Again, my dog in the fight is not defending universalism broadly, because there's universalist positions that are profoundly evil. As I've explained countless times in my videos and in this Discord, there's tons of consistent principled positions that are just dark. I mean, you can go back in this recording that I'm assuming Bacon Bone is taking right now, and you will hear me saying Hannibal Lecter's position is fully logically consistent, and it's completely fucking evil. Right. And presumably, so when you start attacking universalism and contrasting it with particularism, and then asking me to defend universalism, it's a red herring, because I'm not here to defend universalism broadly. I'm defending my specific position.
I didn't ask you to defend universalism broadly.
I think particularism broadly fails because in principle it doesn't justify it. Just any action could be justified. Universalism, there are specific universal systems that I don't think fail by my standards. And then there are universal systems that I'll reject. So that would be the issue.
No, I don't get it, right? There are particularist systems that could well, I shouldn't say in principle. There are particularist views, right? Somebody could have a set of moral views, right, that are understood to be particularist in character, right, with respect to any outcome that's consistent with all the things that you take to be good and evil, right? So presumably, you wouldn't actually have an objection to that view, right?
I've spelt out my objection repeatedly.
I don't get it.
The objection is that in principle, it justifies all actions. Jack, if tomorrow you wake up and you prefer to rape a child, is that ethical by your system? Please don't pussyfoot. Please don't pussyfoot. Clear answer. It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
But in principle,
and Jack, that is my problem with your system, right?
Yeah, but I don't get it, right? You can wake up the next day and have different principles, right?
No. That is a wrong move, because my current principles absolutely do not justify that. In principle, right now, my system does not justify that. In principle, your system right now is ambiguous towards that. It just has a practical opposition because of your preferences or your values.
I'm not seeing what difference that makes.
It's a massive difference. In principle, your system doesn't make a statement about a Holocaust. In principle, my system does make a statement about a Holocaust.
Yeah,
If
but
if that's not a clear moral issue to you, I don't know what would be.
well, I'm trying to understand, right? If you think there are considerations that justify being a particularist, I'm sorry, being a universalist over being a particularist.
No, there are certain particularist positions that I would rather someone be a Jack Angstreich variety particularist than a Hannibal Lecter variety universalist.
Yeah, but see, the question that I'm concerned with, right, is not actually the specific content, right? I'm concerned with the metaethical issue, right? The metaethical issue is there an argument that can be given, right, to favor universalism over particularism, right?
All right, so I've spelled out my issue with what you're doing there, I think about 3 times, maybe 4, so I'm going to just call that a red herring at this point.
Well, maybe there's somebody else here who understands my objection.
I understand your objection perfectly well. I think that the thing you're not tracking is that you keep going to this red herring, which is trying to have me defend universalism broadly versus particularism broadly.
Well,
I don't defend universalism broadly. I defend a specific ethical system, and I would defend that against just some broad, vague, universal position, just as I would against particularism.
Yeah, but if I say to you what justifies your specific moral system, right? Presumably it's nothing, right? Presumably it's just that is the system that you hold to be correct, right?
Well, of course.
Yeah, okay. So that's not the issue that I'm concerned with, right? The issue that I'm concerned with is whether you think, right, there's a way to justify universalism over particularism.
Okay, and have you heard me make any statement about that at all?
I just asked you the question.
So, no, what I've been talking about consistently this entire time is my specific ethical system. I have a general issue with particularism because particularism does not take a principled stance against anything. It doesn't take a principled stance against a Holocaust. It doesn't take a principled stance against changing the well-being to suffering ratio in the universe to infinite suffering versus infinitesimal well-being.
See, I don't.
Please don't respond by saying a principled system can do the same thing. I'm tired of that red herring.
Well, I don't understand why you think that's an answer to the question, right? If you
what's the question?
The question is, do you think there are considerations, right, that favor universalism over particularism? Right?
Okay, so I don't know how I could be any more clear. I am not.
Well,
I'm not. Jack, do you think that I am defending just universalism per se?
I have no idea. I simply asked, right, whether you thought that there were considerations that could favor universalism or particularism, right? And what I'm not understanding is why you would think it's an answer to the question to say that the reason why you reject particularism is because it doesn't uphold principles or some specific set of principles.
There you go, some specific set of principles.
Yeah, that's not an answer to the question, right?
Well,
that's just saying, right, that I'm a universalist and I'm this kind of universalist, and therefore I reject particularism.
Well, no, where this started from was you asking about an objection to particularism, and I think that the record will actually show that. And I think that you then sort of shifted into this question of particularism versus universalism, trying to pigeonhole me into defending universalism.
I don't see what difference it makes if the question was phrased, "Do you have an objection?"
Oh, they're hugely different questions. Saying,
well, let me try.
Wait, no. One second. That's a very important thing. Okay. Asking, do I have a problem with particularism is a different question than saying, do you favor universalism over particularism, just both simpliciter, both per se? It's a completely different question. Do you have a problem with X versus do you favor Y over X? That's a difference of question.
Right. The question is, are there considerations, right, that would justify rejecting particularism, right, rejecting particularism and accepting universalism, right?